Kia ora, everyone. Welcome. Kōwhiri waria toko ingoa. Really, really excited to have this kōrero today with Kathryn Berkett and talk a bit about her new book. And also a whole lot of other insights that Kathryn is going to share with us today. Really, really exciting. And I'm sure the 1 hour is not going to be enough, but we will do as much as we can. I'll get us going with the karakia, and then a little intro about Kathryn, and then we'll dive straight into it. So, karakia te matanga, whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai. Ehi ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, taihie mauri ora. Welcome, everybody. So I'm going to do a formal intro about Kathryn, and then we'll give you a chance, Kathryn, to share a little bit more about yourself. So Kathryn is a passionate neuroscientist empowering positive change through accessible brain science. She holds a master's in educational psychology and is completing a second master's in applied neuroscience through King's College London. Kathryn is also a certified practitioner of the Neurosequential Model of Therapeutics and runs her own business, Engage, delivering talks and training that make neuroscience, biology, and psychology accessible and engaging for every audience. So Kathryn is here with us to talk a little bit about this book today, what's going on in there, and it's all about the neuroscience of the adolescent brain. And she's going to share some insights and also a little bit about unpacking that huge physical, chemical changes which drive all those emotions, behavioral changes over those teenage years, and what we could be doing to respond in ways that I guess allow our rangatahi to get through some of those turbulent times, and move ahead in life in positive, ways and meet their potential. So, Kathryn, welcome. Kia ora. You have been doing this mahi since before, relational neuroscience and trauma-informed approaches were heard about. And I am really, really keen to hear from you a little about your journey in terms of, how you got into this space, and, what has driven you to write this book and why this specific, age group and what drives you in this space. So welcome, Kia ora.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that intro. What drives me? You guys, everybody out there. Yeah, I love what I do. If someone had said to me at the school, and one of my buzzes is getting our kids to understand so many opportunities out there, not just, the lawyer, the nurse, the mechanic, the sort of thing. If someone had said, "What did you want to do?" I would have put my hand up and said, "I want to talk, get paid for talking, and chuck some travel into it." And guess what I do? I get paid to talk and travel. So love my life.
Perfect.
Very lucky. It didn't start off with that aim. I left school wanting to be an occupational therapist and actually went to an alternative education centre, worked with the young people there, and was just blown away with how intelligent these kids were, but how their choices were so limited. By the time you get to AE, alternative education, especially back then, quite old, that was it. You weren't coming out. You weren't going back to school, or you weren't getting any sort of real prospective jobs or anything. So I said, "What can I do?" And someone said, "Study to become an educational psychologist." So I did my master's. I didn't do my registration year, so I didn't register. I was a single mum with 2 kids, 6 and 3 by that stage. So doing a 1 year registration was not on the cards. So I worked for Ministry of Ed, went to a conference with a brainwave speaker, and fell in love with neuroscience and suddenly went, man, this neuroscience stuff, this is buzzy. Applied to be an NMT trainer, so Neurosequential Model of Therapeutics, actually got declined. And then Dr. Perry came to Aotearoa and I met him for lunch, and I was the only one, two of us allowed in to meet him. And he said, no, apply again. Oh, I'll get you in. So that was pretty cool. So I applied again, and I believe myself or Brendan were the first NMT practitioners certified in Aotearoa. And just from then, leaps and bounds, worked for Brainwave, but then got my own business. Nathan McCarty-Wallace really encouraged me to get out on my own. And that was 15 years ago that I have had
Yeah.
my own business. And yeah, I just, and
Amazing.
every year I say, am I going to work next year? Oh, we'll just see. And then the bookings come and I go, oh, people still want to hear what I'm saying. Let's
Yeah.
work for another year. So I don't have to go get a real job. So
That is
yeah, I don't consider this a
amazing.
real job. It's too fun. So that's my life. I just work year to
Yeah.
year, and you guys are still wanting to hear me and still wanting to listen. So
Yes.
I'll keep
Yes.
talking. Yeah.
Kathryn, often we'll get people asking, where do I study? What are my options of, studying because I want to become more neuroscience informed, I want to become more trauma informed. In your sort of, space, and sort of, connections that you have, networks that you have, what do you think? How do people go about studying if they are keen to, really dig into some of this learning? And actually get a qualification? What are some of those pathways they can access?
Yeah. So you've got to think about what the outcome is. Do you want a,
Mhm.
so I looked when I was doing at this stage, a master's, and I was also looking at doing Laurie Desautel's program.
Yes.
But when I think about globally, when someone says you've got a master's from King's College, that's going to give me more points
Yeah.
than a certificate from someone else because my aim was to become a public speaker and have points next to my name. Do you understand?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what do you want? What do you want? Do you want to globally seen and recognised, or do you want
Mm.
to do so? Even Dr. Bruce Perry, when I first started, nobody knew what NMT was. So it wasn't
Yes.
something that was getting me work. Luckily, I had my master's of EdPsych.
Yeah.
So think about what you want.
Okay.
Also, be careful with neuroscience because neuroscience, if you do something through Berry Street, so in Australia, if you do something through the Child Trauma Academy, which is the Dr. Perry one, they've got courses, they've got options. Laurie Desautel, she's got hers. Desautel, sorry, I say her name wrong.
Yeah.
Um, they're programs that will help you as an educationalist.
Yeah.
What I'm doing is a master's of applied neuroscience. I'm learning about cells and how cells fire and how genomes go. And that's probably not what you want to know if you're a educator. Do you see what I mean? So
Yes.
look at the course and say what neuroscience is literally the cells and how they connect.
Yeah.
Behavioral neuroscience, educational neuroscience. That's probably
Amazing.
what I would expect the people here want to do. There's some
Yeah.
stuff in Otago. I know that they're running some, but there's not so much in Aotearoa that we have good courses like that running.
Yeah.
I'd say we'll start seeing them. But Berry
Um,
Street in Aussie is a really good place as
okay.
well to look at.
The Otago one, are you talking the one that's at Otago Polytechnic that
Yeah,
we used to
yeah.
run? Yeah. And that was
Again, it's
recruiting
very
from here.
neuroscience.
Yes, yes. So no, that's really good to know and understand because you do hear about workshops and training, sort of, certificates like you say, but yeah, really important, isn't it? Like, what's your aim, ultimately, and how do you want to use, I guess, that information and learning. So really fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. Um, let's move on to your book. So, now, first of all, you've said the neuroscience of the adolescent brain. And I must admit, I was like, adolescent, teenager. Well, is that the same term? Yes, it is. I had to check in and make sure I had my facts right. So that's good. Um, Tell us a little bit about what drove you to write about this time period. Why do you think the adolescent brain is so important? Why is it so critical to fully understand it? And the one other thing I'm really, really curious to hear, at the outset is the attachment during the adolescent years. You know, um, how important is it? what should it look like? What should ideal attachment, in those years look like? We know about the early years. We know how important attachment is, in the early years. And we know attachment is, important across the lifespan, the connections we make, the relationships we have. But in the adolescent years, why is, attachment so different? And how do we, make sure it's the best we can as parents or as caregivers? What can we do? So, on to you.
All right. So, first, why did I write about that time period?
Yeah,
Honestly, because people will buy a book about that time period. It's just very clear, very honest.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
do early years presentations. People
yeah,
are interested. You do an adolescent one, and everyone's craving for that information.
yeah,
We
yeah,
do have a lot about the first 1,000 days. Now, that is the most important. That is 100% the most important. I also
yeah.
want to write a book about high-end trauma, but
Mhm,
writing a book about that's going to take me a lot and
mhm,
understand it. So I thought first go round, what's the best
mhm,
one? Adolescent brain. And just by the way, adolescent teenager, they're not exactly parallel. And the reason being
oh,
because a lot of our young people, because puberty is the beginning of
yes,
the brain changes.
yeah.
And a lot of our kids are hitting adolescence, starting
Yes.
puberty, 7, 8, 9.
True.
You're not a teenager. So I did use the word, they wanted
Yeah,
to use the
yeah,
word
yeah,
teenager.
yeah,
I've used the word teenager on the back because
yeah.
that is there, but it's not the same. And
That's
also you're an adolescent until you're 25-ish, 32, and
okay.
that's past the teens.
Yeah,
So it's fine to say teenager,
yeah,
but that's why
yeah,
I couldn't put it on the title because being a
yeah,
neuroscientist, I
yeah,
couldn't, yeah, because we have precocious puberty, really early
yeah.
puberty, um, more
That's
often now.
actually such a valid point because I mean, when I was growing up, you usually hit puberty around that 11, 12, 13 year sort of mark. And it is something that, kids are sort of hitting puberty much sooner. So very
Absolutely.
interesting about that.
Mm.
Yes, so
Or to your attachment. Shall I talk to your
yes,
attachment
yes,
question?
please. On to the other little bit.
Now, and remember all of this stuff, I've got a 4-day, thanks, Kate. I've got a 4-day retreat coming up in August, and I will talk for those 4 days and I'll train for 4 days and I'll still have stuff to say. So, why I say that and why I want people to know is because I'm doing things really quick, but please
Yeah,
know that there's way more to all of this.
yeah.
But if we talked about attachment starts in the first few years. That's when we form our attachment, when that serve and return relationship establishes. Now, we can change attachments later. We can. But let's just say you've formed your attachment, you've got your secure attachment or your insecure attachment. By the way, lots of us get through life with insecure attachment. It's not the be all and end all. But what we want is we want them to feel safe with us. We want them to have this relationship with us. Because when we hit puberty, one of the first things that will change in the brain is the knowledge, this implicit knowledge that we are now going to be able to have a child, because that's what puberty does, changes our body to reproduce. We are going to be able to have a child and we need to protect that child. And the best way to protect that child is to form a new tribe of younger, healthier, not so old people. And which is why us as parents get pushed away, but I need you to know it's only one layer. Now, some kids will completely, that's what I'm saying, I'm generalizing, but it's sort of one away. Now, that means you're sort of tethered there.
Yeah.
They don't ask you lots anymore. They don't come to you with all their problems that, in general, which means if you've got a good attachment, do you see then it's safer having them out there? They're happier to come back in, go back out, come back in, go back out, if we've got a good attachment. If we
Okay.
don't have a good attachment and their brain says, hey, let's rebel, go outside, find other people, don't talk to our parents and ask them information, then you're a little bit more tenuous. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And that's why attachment in the first few years
Yeah.
will come out in the wash in the adolescent years in a really simplistic
Okay.
way.
So it's almost like the early years attachment is like the foundational sort of block where you start off
100%.
with, and then that moving out of that attachment safety circle, um, if you're not already well established, if you're not well connected, then that puts kids at more risk, I guess. When that foundational attachment is missing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's the other thing that I found really interesting when I was going through the book was it talked about how the adolescent brain is wired to um is it get dopamine and oxytocin from new connections and new faces and but also they don't recognize the facial expressions and things like that really well. Do you think that not recognizing the facial expressions really well plays into some of the, I guess, tension that you see or pulling away that you see from parents as well? Um, I often get these comments, like, why you question me? Like almost like I'm interrogating. I'm not interrogating. I'm just saying, I'm just commenting. And so do you think that plays into some of those interpersonal sort of tensions that arise at that stage?
Highly likely. Right. So,
Yeah,
and this is a beautiful thing about learning this scientific stuff
yeah,
is because then you start going, oh, like I could tell you one thing in the book and you actually go, oh, that makes sense over here, something completely different.
yeah,
So I could have just written, this is what happens and this is what you
yeah,
should do. But I wanted to give you the science.
yeah.
So and I've talked about them in different ways. Dopamine is an increased sensitivity, so that has a huge impact. One of the things is that when we meet people we know, we
Yeah,
go, oh, that feels nice. I had a bit of dopamine. And as adults, we've already established our tribe. I can get new people. I didn't know you when I was an adolescent, but now I know you. So when I see you, you've been established into my tribe now. So I have a little dopamine. Oh, it's Rian. We're
yeah,
that now. Now, we as adults only get dopamine if you've already established yourself as safe to my
okay,
tribe. Adolescents, especially when they hit that puberty stage,
yeah,
they get double the dose
yeah,
of dopamine when they meet any other adolescent. They don't ever
okay,
have to have met them before because do you see they've got to form a new tribe and it's no
yeah,
use just sticking with the people they've already established. They
yeah,
need to buy a whole new group of people.
yeah,
So they now get this activation of buzz as soon
yeah.
as they meet we get around about their age. And
Yes.
every time if you have a wine, if you have a chocolate, if you have a piece of
Yeah,
licorice, your brain gets dopamine and it wants
yeah,
more. And now met someone, they've got dopamine, they want more, and they can get
yeah,
it lots of different ways. So dopamine sensitizers. But when we talk about the facial expressions and the perspective taking is the other one I talk through, I
yeah,
call them glitches because
yeah,
the brain is upgrading. It's got so much going on, but because it's got so much going on, it glitches a little bit. Just like when you're
yeah,
updating a computer, you have to bit of patience.
yeah,
Now, two of the glitches is the facial and the perspective.
yeah,
That facial means when they are completely calm, they've got food, they're fine, they're good, they can read your facial expressions, all the complicated ones. You look confused, you look interested. Oh, you are interrogating me, but I know that you love me, so that's
yeah,
okay, right? As soon as they get a bit emotional, that glitch is just too much. And they go back to the three basic emotions: happy, sad, angry.
mm,
So they look at you, you're going, what's in the fridge for dinner? And they go, you hate me. You know why? Now, we could just have
yeah,
a maybe just go, oh, it's okay, sweetheart. It's just thinking about dinner.
yeah,
But what if they're with their friends? Because what we're doing now is we're putting our kids chronologically together
yeah,
in a school, in a classroom, with chronologically same age kids who are all chronologically going through this same glitch.
yeah,
Before, naturally, we had tuakanatai. We had different ages, we had different
yeah,
people. There was all a beautiful mix. Now they're all together. How many girls, and I'll be generalistic, but just
yeah,
generally so girls, she hates me. No, I don't. Yeah, I can tell by the way you look at me, you hate me. Or why'd you hit him? He was going to hit me first. No, he wasn't.
yeah.
Yeah, he was. I could tell by the way you're looking at me, you're going to hit me. How many of those conversations have you had?
And I was just thinking about one of those recent really big ones where you've got all these um teenage kids having these major fights and breakouts because somebody looked at me like this and somebody was giving me the evil eye. And like I remember reading it and I was thinking, oh my gosh, like they get into such sort of huge disagreements and physical violence just based on a look or, not liking the way somebody looks at them. But it makes sense now when I was reading it. I was like, oh my gosh, that's probably what it is, because you can't imagine doing that just because somebody looked at me like this. I'm gonna go, lash out at them. So I guess that's
They,
that's probably
they
what is at
Yeah,
play,
and they
isn't it?
often truly believe that person was going to hurt them. They truly signal that this is dangerous. This
Oh,
person hates them. And now I'm not saying it's always this. Don't go back to your
yeah,
child and go, "Oh, it's okay, you're allowed." But why I'm saying this is because, and by the way, if people go, "What do we do?" Talk to your kids about it. Let them
yeah,
read that one section. Let them read the summary in the book, or just talk to them
yeah,
about it. I've got an online video as well, and or just say this. Say your brain's
yeah,
different, and so maybe pause for a little minute,
yeah,
and walk. But tell them their brains are going through these beautiful upgrades, these glitches, and they may misinterpret facial expressions.
yeah.
Why can't we have them in on the game with this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that's that metacognition, isn't it? Being aware of how your brain works, what's happening, becoming more self-aware and things like that.
Which we can
Would
only
really
do when they're
help.
in a really good space. But
Yes.
when they're an adolescent, they're able to do that. When
Yeah,
they're in the right
yeah,
space, way
yeah,
better than they could. They've
yeah,
got the capacity. They're starting to get that capacity. So
yeah,
it's something we should do in a
yeah,
respectful, small,
yeah,
don't sit down and have a 1 hour lecture with them.
yes,
There's little combos. Hey, you thought about how your brain works? Did you want to have a wee look through this,
yeah, yeah,
book
yeah,
or,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I love the little thing about communicate with them at a time when they are in a good space, they're well fed, they're sort of, rested and not cranky, grumpy, upset.
Driving in the car parallel. Sorry, can I just add that in? Get
Yeah.
parallel with your adolescent. Stop looking them in the face.
Wow.
Again, for
Yeah.
lots of reasons. Make a cup of tea, go for a drive, sit
Yeah.
down on the couch and just don't look at them.
Yeah.
Most of the time, they don't want to be looked at. It's very
Yeah.
difficult to have a conversation with an adolescent face to
Yeah.
face.
Why is that, Catherine? Why is it the
Because they're
parallel
trying
is
to read
better?
your face and they're finding that really hard. That's really difficult for them already. But there's
Yeah.
also a lot of other things with this adolescent type status and positional and all these sorts of things. But it's
Yeah.
just you'll notice if you've got a dinner table set up, these people who
Yeah.
who sits at dinner tables anymore. But if we're still sitting at dinner tables, they want
Yeah.
to sit opposite you when they're a kid. They hit adolescence, they hit puberty, and you
True.
watch, they'll move their position at the dinner table. They don't want
Yeah.
to sit face to face with you anymore. It's quite difficult for them
Yeah. Yeah.
to read and interpret and do all of that stuff. Yeah.
And I guess even otherwise, generally speaking, when you're face to face, when you think about creating safety, when you're engaging with people, interacting with people, I guess sort of sitting head on face to face, eye to eye contact can be quite confronting. And even otherwise we say, sort of position yourself a little bit diagonally, sort of, so it's not so confronting and threatening as such. So I guess that
Even
makes
for
sense
us
as well,
adults.
isn't it? Yeah. No, that absolutely makes sense. But this was see you've already moved me on to the next little bit around the communication, like how do we communicate with them effectively? So you've already answered that question of mine. My one thing was around the language. You've mentioned sort of, share information in small bits. But what sort of language are we using when we're talking about, you know, brain development in those years? I've jokingly said to my son, I'm like, your brain shuts down. And so you're probably not using your brain at this point. Um, and we laugh and joke about it sometimes, but how do you talk? What's the kind of language that's appropriate and yet informing them well enough, respectful, not only when we're interacting with them, but also for ourselves to understand. And what I'm trying to get to here, Catherine, is how do we speak about our kids' development, sort of, the way the brain works in a respectful, manner upholding way, so that they can still take pride in themselves and they don't feel like they're inadequate or that they are, struggling at this point and not able to do enough. How do we make sure we're building them up with the positive language, the positive communication, and yet giving them the accurate information.
So you'll notice, whenever I talk about the adolescent brain, I definitely use the term upgrade, and I purposefully differentiate that from a shutdown. I get that our kids are going through such an upgrade that they do have less access to parts of their brain at times, so it can feel like a shutdown. But if we actually scan the brain during the adolescent time, the energy, the activity that's going on in there is unbelievable. That's why they have to eat more. That's why they have to sleep more. Myelination is happening. We've got the mesocortical pathways that go to the cortex. That some of it is shutting down to remodel, but the other bits are adding more energy. Right. So why I'm saying this is because this is not a turning off of our brain. Okay, absolutely not. When you come out the end of adolescence, the brain uses less energy. It is more efficient because of all the upgrading it's done. If anybody's done a remodel of your house, yes, we use renovation as an idea, but that's not a shutdown. It's an upgrade. And that's what I want people to use the language. Lots of reasons, because if our young people hear it, I'd much rather think that I'm going through an upgrade than a shutdown. It also gives them license, right? Well, then if my brain's shutting down, I don't have to remember, I don't have to do anything. Mate, your brain is upgrading like you wouldn't believe it. Yeah. And I get it that sometimes you're not going to be, able to do that. But that's because it's going through such an amazing change. I mean, how cool for them to protect their brain, to look after their brain, but also for us to make sure we stay in the game, right? And we, people said the cure for 12 is 13, the cure for 13 is 14. The idea was just shut them away, leave them alone until their brains grew. All right, so leave them until their brains grew. Well, what if we said to the computer doing its upgrade, we'll shut it down, turn it off, and we've not done the upgrade because we're not putting the goods in. So through understanding what they're doing, this facial expression, this learning about other people, this interactions, all of these, what if we don't give them any input? Well, then they're going to come out the other end not having done the upgrade well. So I want it to be a language that shows us what's going on. It's dynamic. It's amazing. And we need them to know that. And the more that we say it, the more we get it, and the more we give them a bit of chill it, oh goodness, you're going through an upgrade. No wonder we need to give you a little bit more, time and stuff like that. So I absolutely want the language to change. Look, if you say to your kid every now and then, oh my God, your brain's shut down. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about all of our behavior around them, because it is, it 100% is. It's not even just a say it and make it real. It's truly such an upgrade. We can see that now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I like that, the upgrade rather than the shutdown makes so much more sense. One of my questions is, we talk about neuroscience of the brain and we talk about the sort of generalization, in terms of how it works, how it's wired, all of that during the adolescent years. Obviously for boys and girls, there's gender differences. What are some of the key gender differences that are important for us to know and be aware of so that we are, I guess, responding in more appropriate ways? And yeah, to talk to us a little about the gender differences that are
Yeah,
likely to be
and
seen.
can I just tell you, this was a nervy little part of my book because I didn't grow up understanding any of this stuff, so this is a
Yeah,
huge part. So I actually got my daughter and some people. My daughter's got a lot of youth around her, so I said, "Is this okay?" So what I've said in the book and what I'm very clear on is that it's about hormones. Okay,
yeah,
so what we know is the body gets activated by hormones. So you've got testosterone, generalizingly we
yeah,
associate with male, and the progesterone, estrogen, we generalizingly associate with female. Now, when we hit puberty, we get a massive rush of those, right? We can see it in the body, but they affect different parts of the brain. Now, just because you're born male doesn't mean you're going to have testosterone or a high level or whatever. So what we know about bodies is they activate the hormones, and whichever hormones they're activating, that's going to impact the behavior in the brain, okay? And
okay.
when we start looking into the genetics of this, it's not just XY, it's XY with the SR gene on it. And do they see testosterone? Do they not? There is a lot more about this. than even I understand, but I'm getting
Yeah.
pretty good at understanding it now. So why I'm saying that is we
Yeah.
do not have male and female at two ends
Mm.
in these little boxes. We
Yes.
literally have really fascinating, just since you're on the
Yeah.
podcast. When I was doing this study, when I was researching
Yeah.
this stuff, there's a tribe that's very interrelated. So they have a lot of similar genetics. And they literally have a syndrome that's called penis at 12 in their language,
Yeah.
because someone grows up as a female and
Yeah.
at 12, when they hit puberty, around that time, they literally start seeing the testosterone and they grow
Yeah.
a penis. So it's called penis at 12. So you tell
Wow.
me that we've got, it boxed here. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I talk about male, I'm talking about testosterone. When I'm talking
Yeah.
about female, I'm talking about estrogen, progesterone, not
Yeah.
born sex, right?
Yeah.
But in the brain, they activate differently. Generalizingly,
Mm.
testosterone encourages
Yeah.
status, competition, because the male, and I'm being very archaic, I
Yes.
know, but the
Yeah.
male is stronger, their muscles are stronger because of
Yeah.
testosterone. So they go and hunt and they fight, and that's a hierarchical structure. So our boys, I'm generalizing, hit puberty, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden they need to win, and they need to know where everybody is, and they need to know how much you're pumping and how fast you are and how is. And you ask
Yeah.
your son there, if
Yeah.
they go to the gym, what are they pumping? They'll know. They know, and they know how
Mm.
far they are on the list. They don't, I said they want to win, but they just want to compete. And
Yeah.
we're taking that away. We're saying, no, no, just compete against yourself and it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Now, if they don't
Yeah.
want to compete, they don't need to compete. But boy, oh boy, do they want to compete.
Yeah.
Some of our girls.
Yeah.
For our girls, this massive estrogen rush increases oxytocin. And oxytocin is our bonding hormone.
Yeah.
So our girls, and our bonding hormone makes us fall in love with our babies so that
Yeah.
we can care for them. What happens with girls is they all get this rush of oxytocin, and they fall oxytocin in love with each other, and they can't leave each other, and they have to be with each
Yeah.
other. And so then they can't, they have to be in the same netball team, and I'm going to die if
Yeah.
I don't get to that party when everybody else is there. And it's not
Yeah.
just this before they need to. Why? Because if
Yeah.
we oxytocin fall in love with each other, then
Yeah.
when one of us has a baby, we all fall oxytocin in love with that baby, and we all care for that baby. So if
Yeah.
we let men compete and get stronger and hierarchical, and we let
Yeah.
women bond and do that, we would generalizingly have
Yeah.
those tribes working very well. Do you see?
Yes.
And
Yes.
by the way, Joan of Arc, everybody, we go against them sometimes, that's fine. But
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
we're doing is we've got a current situation that may not allow that. And so that's what we have to
Yeah.
respect. Hormones impact parts of the brain differently,
Yeah.
different hormones. So we need to respect that.
Yeah. That's really, really fascinating. And I always used to wonder growing up. I was one of the tomboy, girls. I loved getting out and about. I actually enjoyed competing. I always thought it was because my father encouraged me to, get into sports and stuff. But I genuinely loved it. And, um, I used to notice how different friends in my own circle would be inclined in different ways. And so that makes so much sense, isn't it? That although we're, like you say, the female, it's how the hormones are actually impacting us and affecting our brains. So really, really fascinating.
So you might have
And
had a higher level of testosterone. And we've got Caster Semenya,
mm,
and I can't remember the new lady in the Olympics. And they've literally been
yes,
found
yeah,
to have female exterior bodies, but they've got
yeah,
testosterone activation. Caster Semenya is not allowed to compete unless she takes hormones to drop her testosterone level to make her a female. So
yeah,
there's no understanding there. But you've also
yes,
hit on a
yeah,
really important point: is environment is huge. So
yeah,
our little kids, because the boys jump and they don't fall over so much, we let them
yeah,
jump more. And because our
yeah,
girls talk to us, we talk to them more. So we do have to be really
yeah,
careful in the early years, because their natural progression would be this. Let's try and expose our boys, girls to different
yeah,
things that are not necessarily gender related as well. So
yes,
your dad making you compete and pushing you
yeah,
may have also had an influence. There's
yeah,
always
yeah,
influences in the
yeah,
environment as well. It's not
yeah,
just genetics, but their
yes,
hormones do
yeah,
have an impact.
yeah. Very fascinating. Um, what about the differences in our neurodivergent population? What are some of those brain-based differences that especially during the adolescent sort of years that occur, that again we need to be aware of so we can understand them better, support them better. Um, what are some of those changes that we should be looking out for our neurodivergent adolescents?
Yeah, so I can't specifically and that's I can't think of any research that's coming out around specifically, is there a different trajectory
Yeah,
for young people? But one thing that I do know, and that would feed into the dopamine sensitivity space,
yeah,
and I'm putting a few things together here, it's
yeah,
that if we're born neurodivergent, so if we're born processing the world differently, which is my
yeah,
because there's no single definition of neurodivergent,
yes,
but you process the world differently, it's more likely that you'll have more stress in your life. So there'll be more
yeah,
of a stress response, and dopamine can be impacted by how often we activate the stress response. And
yeah,
so when you get to adolescence and you get that sensitization of dopamine, we can see that that can affect young people, neurodivergent people, different. So that seeking of risk, that seeking of that, that pushing away, that sort of thing could be
yeah,
enhanced due
yeah,
to dopamine. But overall, there's not, anecdotally, people have talked
yes,
about, when I talk about the pushing away,
yeah,
anecdotally, people sometimes say that kids quite high on the autism spectrum disorder don't seem to do the pushing away, but that's
yeah,
anecdotal, that's not research.
yes, yes,
Um, but yeah, but generalizingly, I'm learning in my master's at
yeah,
King's, I'm learning a lot about the neurodivergent brain and how we process the world very differently.
yeah.
And I'm sure that's going to start feeding into understanding adolescence a lot more.
And it's very interesting, but like I'm just putting a few things together and thinking, again, this is just me thinking out loud, that for a lot of our neurodivergent kids, the outside world can be quite overwhelming, quite unsafe, uncertain. And so I guess for them, often the family, the parents, the caregivers are their safe space, isn't it? And so for them, probably if the outer world is not safe, they're probably less willing to let go of their safety, and an attachment with the caregivers and parents.
It's really,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I wonder if that sort of feeds into it, because typical teenagers, and I've often wondered, with my youngest son who is autistic, and often, he doesn't have the same urge and need to connect with peers so much. I'll encourage, go socialize, go, connect, catch up, and like, no, I don't need to. I'm happy, I'll do it, another weekend. And it's typical for so many of our, kids. And yet they do go through phases where they want to have some of those connections, want to have some of those attachments as well. So yeah, so there's sort of both you see from time to time. Yeah, and it varies, doesn't it? So
Mm.
very interesting, yeah.
But I'd say,
Um,
especially with the ADHD brain, and that, because autism has been studied genetically for quite a long time. We've got quite a
yeah,
lot of information on autism genetically and
yeah,
tracking the genome. But the
yeah,
ADHD is quite a new thing, and they've very much starting to track the genome of
yeah,
ADHD now, and seeing certain things like, which is quite interesting, ability to know how close you are to things, like they
yeah,
have to keep touching people or touching or
yes,
moving, spinning to keep their proprioception down, but also
yeah,
time. How long is an hour? How much is a week? They're seeing that that's very consistent between what we call primary ADHD, so genetic ADHD, and
yeah,
that will be coming through in new. When we do another diagnosis, they say they're going to be talking about bringing that in. Why I'm saying that is because now that they can see the genes, and the research they're doing is amazing. I would say they'd start to look at what's going to be impacting in the adolescent for our
yeah,
neurodivergent. But I would say if you've got a young person who's neurodivergent, just watch
yeah,
and know that their brain's changing, and we may not have the information about why, but you can
or
usually
how?
tell that they're not doing this
Yeah,
stuff on
yeah,
purpose.
yeah,
They're confused
absolutely.
too. They're feeling very different in their bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is something that makes you feel unsafe within you, isn't it? Because that sense of safety comes from within you and from outside of you and the interpersonal connections. And so if there's changes in your body and you can't fully make sense of it or fully understand them, I think you're likely to see. And I do remember my
Just can
own
I just say,
son.
menopausal woman unite, right? And we're all talking
Yes.
about it now, so it feels weird. So just say it. Carry on.
No, absolutely. I remember my oldest son when he sort of hit puberty and we started having a lot of these loud outbursts and behaviors, and I couldn't fathom for a while what was going on, why was it happening, and I couldn't see any sort of connections between what was happening and going on. And the only thing I remember thinking was maybe it's puberty, maybe it's, because of that age and stage, maybe that is what is throwing him off. And the other thing I had noticed was even as a child, he would, before he felt sick, so if he was coming down with a sore throat or flu or something, he would get upset, he would get anxious, and he would actually get teary. And because he doesn't speak, he can't tell us. And I just noticed that as a pattern. So I put sort of, those patterns together, and deducted that before he fell sick, there was stuff happening in his body, or while he was falling sick, and I didn't know fully, um, he was uneasy and anxious about it, and that's probably why. And I've heard, sometimes other autistic kids, non-speaking, will sort of do that sort of stuff. So that sort of stuck with me. But yeah, the puberty, the changes that are happening, that are going on, if you don't understand and you can't express, it can be quite overwhelming and scary, I guess.
And
So
imagine.
sometimes, yeah, it could well be that.
Which is
Um,
again why I want the language to be upgrade and change it. Like because that if you told them your
yeah.
brain's shutting down, it doesn't
Yes,
feel
yes,
validating, eh? But
yes,
mate, you're
yes.
going through a massive upgrade. Like I don't actually know fully what's going on, but something's going
Yeah,
on, and so let's
yeah,
work it out together.
yeah,
Oh, you're shutting down. I mean, it
yes,
doesn't
yeah,
feel to me that that's how
yeah,
we should be talking about it. I don't think that
yeah,
respects the enormity of what they're
yes,
experiencing.
absolutely. Um, I've got a question around, y- you know, how do you, as a parent, as a caregiver, offer all these opportunities for risk taking so they're allowed to go out there, find their tribe, connect with others and all of that, but at the same time keep them safe because we know in terms of I guess reactions, they're sort of delayed in terms of how they react to something, or sometimes it's the other way where, they'll react really quickly to, like you say, some of those facial expressions. How do you strike that balance between keeping them safe and allowing them opportunities for risk taking? What are some of the ways in which we can be doing that, practically at a practical level, and both in our homes as well as in our schools? How can we make that happen?
And by the way, risk taking, when we say risk taking, we often in our heads think, abseiling or, driving fast
Yeah,
cars or
yeah,
something like that. Risk taking is emotional as well, is saying hi to someone
mm,
or, so there's risk taking
yeah,
is not just physical, putting yourself at bodily risk. I sometimes laugh, and I remember my daughter telling me years after she left school that because my daughter's a very good girl, just naturally.
yeah,
And she goes, you know what we used to do, Mum, when there was a reliever teacher, the group of us would all pick an accent and we'd all have to speak in that accent for the period. And I went, oh, that's my daughter's risk taking, right? So
yeah,
why I'm putting that in perspective is because we sometimes think they have to go and jump off things to be risk taking.
yeah,
Watch them, they'll put them. So let's give them chances to take risks. So let's give them chances to be a
yeah,
little bit independent, not do as
yeah,
it, work their own way through things and stuff. But
yeah,
big importance is the only way we can let them take a risk. The only way that we can look at it and go, is this appropriate? Is this okay? Is if we are calm.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So you don't make any decisions. And if you make decisions when you're stressed,
yeah,
then you're allowed to change your decision afterwards.
yeah,
You're not going out. You're never going out. And then the next day you go, oh, actually, it's totally fine if they went out with their friends. I
yeah,
was just stressed. So why I'm saying that is you have to make decisions in your green brain and your cortex.
yeah,
But we look at it and ask ourselves honestly, is it dangerous? And I still, there was a teacher only day, I'd forgotten it was a teacher only day, and I was training over in Wairarapa, and my son went, Mom, it's teacher only day. Oh, yeah, you're coming with me. So I had him over with us as teaching teachers, and then he said, I want to go and play basketball. I'm like, no, you can't. And then I went, wait. And I thought about it. The roads aren't very busy there. I knew where he was. He didn't have a phone. So we made this plan that if you come back and I'm not here, then you need to stay here and I'll come back here. Like,
Yeah.
do that, do that. And I'm like, and then when I came back, some of the people going, where's Mason? And I'm like, I was off to the play basketball. Oh, but, and it was like, yeah, actually, that's my first reaction. But
Yeah.
yeah, something bad could happen.
Yeah.
But amazing things. He met some people, he chatted to some people, he played basketball all afternoon, he learned some new things, he did come back,
Mm.
I left, and so we had a little bit of a realize there that was good that we'd made a plan. All I'm saying is think it through. What's the
Yeah.
worst that could happen?
Yeah.
And is it okay?
Yeah. One of the things I've had to learn is almost tell myself that my role as a mother was changing. Um, that the mothering, the caring that I did for my kids when they were younger, I need to stop, let go, and do it in a different way now. And so I've had to do that, sort of talking to myself and go, I need to give more of the choice to them, more of that, independence, like you say. And I think it's an adjustment for us as adults, isn't it, as parents? And even in I guess even in, the professional settings, as educators, because you are used to being the one who is in charge. You are used to being the one who is sort of, with the authority. You tend to be the one who's trying to make the decisions. And I think, yeah, letting go of that and offering some of that autonomy to them is so important during those
And
years.
when you mention schools, in all honesty, that's one of the good places I often talk about that is if you as a parent are finding that hard, because it
Yeah,
is hard, right?
yeah,
Then can we find spaces at school to let them all go out, organise their own sports event or something like that, or do this? Keep
yeah,
out of their faces at morning tea times and lunch times. Let them have a little bit of this radu together a little bit or something if it's levels, and
yeah, yeah,
just let them sort this stuff out because schools are a much easier space. If you're a teacher and a parent, you'll know that it's
yeah,
easier to let students
yeah,
have a little bit of a risk taking or a push
yeah,
into that area than it is as a parent. So sometimes it's good to step back and let schools have a little bit more autonomy as well for
yeah,
our kid
yeah,
around our kids.
yeah. That's really interesting. Um, right. What do you think is sort of the recipe or the factors that we need to be considering if we want our teenagers to turn out into adults who are reaching their full potential? And in particular, adults who are caring, who are compassionate, who um, are contributing citizens. And I think personally, this is me personally again, one of the things I've struggled the most with, with my teenage son is saying that there's less compassion. It ebbs and flows, comes in little trickles. Sometimes you see it, but overall you think, oh my gosh, like my lovely, caring, loving child is gone, and you've got somebody who's quite callous and careless and not really wanting to connect with you. That's fine, but even with others around. So what do you do? How do you make sure that those values that you want your kids to have as they grow into adults, that eventually they retain them? What are some of the things that we could be doing to support them and make sure it happens?
So, first of all, the adolescent brain is, like I said, an upgrade, but it is a time when we can remodel it quite easily. So, it is a time we can bring in sort of a lot more empathy and
Yeah,
understanding. But really, and what I loved, Nathan Wallace says it. He says, think about the young person you had before
yeah,
puberty. Okay, because through that upgrade, through all of that change, you're right, you will get glimpses of it, and that will be there. But
yeah,
it's quite hard to see sometimes. And what really
yeah,
worries me is that exactly that parents go, oh, they're rude, they're
Mm.
obnoxious. I've got to tell them off every time they're rude and obnoxious. Let's just taiho a little bit and know that it is this upgrade. So
Mm.
were they that before? And by the way, personality types, some kids aren't going to be that or whatever. And what have
Yeah.
we modeled? What have we taught
Yeah.
them? But what I also ask you to do is look at what they're like when they're
Yeah.
at their friend's house. And they come
Okay.
back from their friend's house, and the parent goes, "Oh, what a lovely child you have." They asked if they could do the dishes, and they were like, and you're like, and so then you go, "Oh, why can't you be like that at my house?" Why I'm saying that is because there's lots of upgrading, there's lots of energy needed. And you know what? They can turn it on there. It
Yeah.
means it's in their brain. It means they've got it. And I'm happy with that. They don't have to be that person in my house every
Yeah.
day. I'm not that person in my house every day.
Yeah.
I'm not my best self. Why I'm saying that is sometimes check in and go, oh, when my kids at your place, do they have a
Yeah.
nice combo? Are they polite? Are they, oh
Yeah.
no, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Excellent. You don't have to be that in my house, but I know that you've got that capacity. You can
Yeah.
relax in my house and you can be a little bit not okay because I get that. They're not allowed to be rude, obnoxious, but they're allowed to
Yeah.
be not perfect. So
Yeah.
check in how they are in other places and you're not
Yeah.
still there, but also know that it's not telling you who they're going to be.
Yeah.
They're going through an upgrade, and during an upgrade, things are different.
Yeah. That is amazing. I love that because I think as a parent, that is one of my fears. And I sometimes think I'm like, I go on about inclusion and go on about, equity and stuff. Will I actually turn out kids, who are actually going to uphold any of that in life? Um, as we move ahead, yeah. So it has been something really interesting that I've pondered over lately. Um, One of the things, I guess, as parents, often, again, with the changes and stuff, when you don't understand, you sometimes struggle to cope with, I guess, not being able to connect, or feeling that your child is ungrateful for everything you do. And it's like, they show up when they want food, when they want pizza and, the things they want, or when they need cash for something, or a ride to, get somewhere. And other than that, they're not there. And how, as adults, parents, what do you think? And again, personal experience, how have you coped with, some of that? What have you done in terms of, I guess, making sure that you don't allow your own state to then affect your interactions, behaviors with them, so taking that deep breath and yeah, what's worked for you, what's helped for you in the practical moments, when they're being rude, when they're refusing to help out, when they're sort of, walking away and not bothering to, even do something with you. Yeah, how have you personally dealt with it as a parent? What's worked
Yeah,
for
well,
you?
first of all, like, and if anyone's got preteens and all of that sort of young, like from babies, but 4 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, what we're trying to do is form those relationships, create spaces where we let them be them and we hang out with them, not making them hang out with us. We hang out with them. So I sometimes ask, when was the last time you actually saw your young person? And why I say see them is you need to be in their world where they're sort of got autonomy over the space. And I'm not talking about full control, but come here, come and talk to me. It's like, well, can't you go in their bedroom? And if they're sitting on the bed, can you lay on the bed with them? And if that's okay, and ask, is it, oh, cool, I just want to, is it, or you just sit there and you say nothing. And if they say nothing, you say nothing. And then you go, hey, thanks, it was cool hanging out, and you leave again. But we've got to see them. So as a teenager, because as an adolescent, things are changing,
Yeah.
it's harder, right? So you have to make more effort. But it's about those small amounts. All you need is small amounts now, but
Yeah.
being available when they need you. And sometimes we'll say, don't go out, like, and then they do it. And then next minute they come back and they go, oh, hey, can I talk to you? No, no, you didn't do what I asked before. So stop. If you feel any moment of connection, any moment that they need you, can we allow them to come back in? Now, later on, you might say, hey, yesterday you were being a bit obnoxious. Today, you wanted me to talk to me. I talked to you. So actually, given the other day, I'm going to get you to do the dishes and I'm going to sit down because you're going to, something. We can absolutely later on get them to pay back. But find times for connection. But those connections, like I said, need to be where they want to be. And the examples were, we were lucky enough to have a little basketball court at home when Mason was an adolescent. And so he would say, let's go out. I'd say, do you want to go play basketball? I don't want to play basketball. It's not my gig. I want to sit on the couch and chat, right? Yeah. But I'll go out and play basketball because that's out with him. Will I say anything? Not unless he talks to me and not unless we're shooting. And my daughter, she does like to have big chats, but when she's studying and she's there, taking her around a cup of tea, her favorite herbal tea, or, let's just show them that despite the fact that it might be difficult for us, we do want to give, let them know, just let them know we still are there, because it's hard for them. Yes. Think about what's going on for them. And they get home and they're like, and then you're like, you haven't done the dishes and you haven't done this and you haven't done that. No, they haven't. And I'm not saying they get away with doing nothing. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying let's connect with them. How often have you really connected with them? Because they've pushed you away, we sometimes then go further that way. The bowl of cereal. Kath, that reminds me of, there was a lady, she was down in Christchurch, and she said the best thing she ever did with her teenage sons was put a couch next to the fridge. And she used to sit there because she had boys. And so every time they came to get something to eat, the boys would come and sit with her on the couch. So she was part of Brainwave. I still remember her telling us that. So, find places to be with and to see and to connect. And they can be in their spaces. Let's not keep making it about us.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I know my son loves food and I feel terrible, but I find that, offering to take him out to places he likes is the only way I can get that time and connection with him. And it's a really, really interesting. You said, you've got to connect with them in their space and, the way they prefer. And I think that's one of the other things to, I guess, also remember with some of those differences. Like as a mother, I was trying to connect with my teenage son the way I would connect with my mother or father, and obviously it's different for him as a you know male. And so again, I think there's those differences as well that come through, isn't it? Moms trying to connect with the boys and the dads trying to connect with daughters. Again, it might look different from what you
Celia
were used
Lashley,
to
beautiful Celia
growing
Lashley,
up.
she said zip it, and
Yes,
just stop talking.
that
A
is
lot of the time,
so true.
with females with boys, again, being
Yeah,
generalistic,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's feel your
Yes.
way through it, but let's connect, let's make them feel safer, let's understand it. But that's why I love the language of
Yeah,
upgrade, is because it's
yeah,
not easy. There's a
yeah,
lot going on.
true. And I think I really think the way our kids are upgrading at that stage, I think we as parents have to shift gears, I would say, in terms of how we parent and how we interact, engage with them. And I think
Yeah.
that's
The
something we
working
need to
title for
keep
my book,
reminding myself.
the working title for my book,
Yeah.
Chill the Fuck Out.
Love
But
it.
we decided it wasn't going to work for that, but that was it. So that's your shifting gears, all right?
Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that. Look, it's been such a joy talking to you. I'm just trying to see if I've managed to get through most of my questions here, Catherine, but it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you, listening to you about all of this. Really, really appreciate it. And tell us, where do people buy your book from? And what's happening next for you? What are you doing? I know you mentioned about the 4-day retreat. What are the things that are coming up for you in the next few months? And how can people connect with you?
Oh, Can't unhear that title. Yeah, I know it would have got attention. I get that, but the people that read it said it doesn't have that vibe. So you're right. And also, yeah. But anyway, it was my working title. So you can say it in your head if you like. Write it on the inside cover when you get it. So you can buy it off my website, but that means you have to pay postage. So the idea would be to look in your local, should be in your local bookstore. Most of them, it'll be in parenting, or if you just ask there where it is. But you can't buy it off my website, engagetraining.co.nz. On my website, there's some free mini lessons if anybody wants to look at them. They're pretty popular. So they're about the stress response and not about adolescence, but they're about the stress response, sensitization, neuroception, those sorts of things. Got some paid content on there. I've got podcasts with Pio Tere that are really good for whānau to listen to. Got a TED talk about devices and how devices impact. Thanks, Kath. Devices impact. Got the. I'll probably start diversifying. Start sort of thinking about doing some things online. I'm thinking of doing some online parenting things. I don't know, but there's lots of free content, some paid stuff. If I'm in the area, if you want me to come and train at schools or in the community, I do that. Especially if I'm in the area. If you saw that I was in the area and you wanted me to come to an adolescent one, I'm doing them for pretty cheap at the moment, as long as you let me sell my books, because then I can sell some books. If people are coming along to an adolescent one, they'll probably buy books. So if you see that I'm in your area, check out and say, hey, Kathryn, I'll host a talk or something like that. But yeah, I love this stuff. So that's me.
Amazing. No, this has been really, really fabulous. Thank you so much. And we did not even touch on the bit around devices, because that's a whole big bit on its own, isn't it? So yeah. But no, look, thank you so much, Kathryn. Really appreciate you coming along, sharing all your insights. And we're really, really grateful. I'll close us with the karakia. And then if people want to hang, ask some questions, stuff like that. If you're happy to stay a bit, Kathryn will do that. If not, all good. People can leave, but let's close with the karakia.
Just before you karakia, can I just
Yes,
say thank you? I'm
yes,
reading all the little messages and seeing all the floaties. So I just want to acknowledge,
yes.
thank you so much, everybody. That's really lovely. So thank you.
Fabulous. Thanks, Kathryn. Karakia whakamutunga. Unuhia, ki te uru tapunui. Kia wātia, kia mama, tēnā kau. Te tinana, te wairua, i te ara takata. Koiara e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga. Kia tina, hui e, tai ki e. Pomari, everyone. See you at the next kōrero.